I am here with John Amato and David Neiwert of Crooks and Liars. They have a new book out called Over the Cliff, How Obama's Election Drove the American Right Insane. So, let's see what they have to say. Thank you guys for doing this. Can you give a quick summary of the book and what it, basically why we should buy it?
Basically, the book is sort of a journal of the plague year 2009, in which the right wing basically descended into complete madness. We use the term insane kind of rhetorically, but it is a kind of insanity to believe things that are provably untrue. And this right wing, particularly the Tea Party movement, has been taken over by extremists who believe things that are provably untrue. And so we think they're insane.
I mean, it's also perpetuated by the big money interests of Fox News and Dick Armey's organization, Freedom Works, because ultimately there is no right, there is nothing too far right. And they feel that whatever as extreme as they go, it always turns into an anti-government, pro-business movement. So they're quite happy to let them go off the rails, because in the end, it promotes their big business philosophy. And what we tried to do in the book is chronicleize the events that happened as soon as Obama was elected. And I think it's quite revealing in that respect.
We also try to give it some historical.
One thing, can you guys just talk up a little bit, just so we can get over all the other conversation here?
You bet.
Thanks.
We also try to give it some historical perspective. We include a chapter of history, basically the history of the politics of resentment on the right. And we also try to put this in the context of what the Tea Party movement really is, which is right-wing populism. We'd like to make the succinct point that the last time we had mass right-wing populist movement in this country was in the 1920s. It was called the Ku Klux Klan.
Which has had a semi-revival. If you look, if you're just an onlooker and you go and you would see these Tea Party movements, they were holding signs up that were so offensive, but to them, it was, every day, oh yeah, he's a Nazi, he hates white people. This racist element that permeates this movement is quite disturbing. And so it goes back to movement conservatism, and that it went to the 80s, it goes to the 60s, and then it goes back to the 20s, and it always reinvents itself, but it's based on the same premise.
Cultural resentments.
Exactly.
Yeah, and there's, of course, a lot of this is also fueled by media figures, right-wing media figures, some of whom we prominently feature on the cover of the book, most famously, Rush Limbaugh and Glenn Beck, but also political figures like Sarah Palin.
Right. So that actually brings me to my next question, which is has to do with whether the movement, as it's called, is controlled centrally and very top down, or is it an organic force of sorts driven by that resentment that's genuine and real? What's the answer?
It's almost
you think
both
there's an answer?
in a way, because ultimately, if you see figures like Sarah Palin and Newt Gingrich going on Fox News and saying the last thing we need is a third party, because they understand that the Tea Party is actually just an extension of the extreme conservative movement. And if they would actually have an independent third party, it would split the vote. And let's say Mitt Romney's the nominee, he would lose, he would get killed. So they're trying to consolidate it. There are a few people that are trying to keep their independence, but still they are going to vote hyper-conservative. So it still helps them. It might ruin a particular election, AKA up in New York, with Scotia Plaza, but ultimately I believe that they will be taken over by the right wing and be just one amorphous.
So what do you think of the kind of groups like Freedom Works and Americans for Prosperity that are doing a lot to organize these things?
Yeah,
Do you think it could survive without them? I guess that's the question.
Well, you know, it could have never began without that and without the help of Fox News. There would have been fledgling sort of responses to it, but once you put a right-wing media network with the funding, with the emails how to organize, the astroturfing that they did, it helped it flourish, which then allows it to spread its tentacles to normal people who aren't focused in on politics and are economically troubled right now. And then they say, well, maybe they have a different answer. They don't really understand what's going on.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot. The right wing has done a really good job of seeding these ideas over the past 20, 30 years, especially the small government sort of philosophy, but taking it even farther with the sort of reactionary responses to any sort of starting to call taxes slavery and that sort of thing, and so. It was very easy for them to sort of make this movement happen, but it wouldn't have happened without the corporate support from Fox and Freedom Works and people like that. But now, once it's up and moving, it's probably going to take on a life of its own, which is actually a very dangerous thing.
Right. Because when you if you read Thomas Frank or some of the other authors, they call it backlash politics, where they could never win. So they just constantly rail. They always play the victim. It's quite fascinating, but it perpetuates itself. And when Obama was elected, remember there was a cry that conservatism is dead, and I kind of laughed at that notion because that would never happen. Anyway, we have to get going.
Yeah.
Well, thanks a lot.
So it's great
Appreciate your
talking
time.
to you.
Yeah.
No problem.